to the firefighters, it's a risk to the community, it's neighborhood blight. So we need a combination of that. A positive incentive, make it easier for people to develop, but on the other hand, when they just sit on their property and it's boarded up for months, years on end in some cases, and there's fires, I still believe we need penalties on those fires because there's a cost to the city of Winnipeg. And final comment is this: is if I own a piece of property and I have it boarded up for years on end, it shouldn't be fair, Marcy, that you as a taxpayer have to keep paying for the firefighters to show up and fight the fire at my property because I'm doing nothing with it.
You dressing up for Halloween this year?
I am not, but I will be handing out candy.
What are you going to hand out?
We hand out.
Do they know when they come to your house? Do they we're at the mayor's house? Do they know that?
Some of the neighbors do, I think, but some they're kids. They just want the candy. They don't. I don't think they care if it's the mayor or anyone else. But yeah, we look forward to it. It's fun.
Cut you off there. What are you handing out?
Chocolate bars.
Chocolate, yeah. We'll have to see this year. My street has changed. So I think I've got more kids in the street we'll have to hand out as well. Thank you for being here. We'll talk to you next month.
Thank you.
Of course, we'll hear from the mayor before then, but our regular monthly interview will be coming up next month. Scott Gillingham has been in studio with us live on CBC.
Winnipeg firefighters have struggled to keep up with the number of vacant building fires. Last year, the city started billing for the cost of sending crews to battle the blazes. But now the fire department says those fees may have done more harm than good. Last year, the city issued a total of $1.15 million worth of fees for fires in vacant buildings. So far, they've collected nearly $78,500. In some cases, the high fees may have discouraged property owners from making repairs, leading to repeat fires. City staff recommend lowering the fees in the hope more owners will pay up. Mayor Scott Gillingham says he's open to changes.
The goal is to get the result we need, and the result we need is fewer vacant and derelict properties, and those properties turned into developed properties.
The city assesses fees based on the number of fire trucks and other equipment responding. The average fee per property is $26,000, with the highest bill for $138,000. The city recommends a new set of fees, starting at $5,000 for the first fire, up to $20,000 for the fourth and subsequent fires. The William White neighborhood has some of the highest numbers of vacant building fires. Neighborhood Association President Darrell Warren doesn't support lowering the fees.
To the people in the neighborhood, they would probably see the city as being weak. And what I mean by that is the city being weak is they're backing down from these guys.
The city would also write off about $900,000 worth of fees issued last year. The service stopped issuing new fees in December after hearing complaints from property owners. Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Chief Christian Schmidt says in some cases, owners were in the midst of making repairs when a repeat fire occurred.
We need to be cognizant of that, and we don't want to be contributing to some of the problems. We want to be helping to resolve some of the issues in the city.
The city also recommends introducing a new process to waive fees for property owners in some circumstances. The Executive Policy Committee will debate the proposed changes next week. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Laura Chase rents a unit in a fourplex house built in the 1960s, at a time when asbestos was widely used in a range of building materials.
The water damage on the ceiling had been right about there.
In the past 2 years, the Residential Tenancies Branch ordered her landlord to make various repairs, such as replacing drywall that had water damage, fixing the bathtub faucet, and replacing windows. In 2023, the property manager sent a representative to get samples for asbestos testing. The results came back negative in drywall plaster in the bedrooms and beside the kitchen window, and negative in fiberglass insulation.
Based upon the first tests that were done, that were apparently negative, they went ahead and they started doing work.
Chase became suspicious about the test results, so she hired a testing company. One of the samples came back positive for asbestos in the drywall joint compound on the bathroom ceiling. She later got testing done for the drywall joint compound in the bedroom, and it was also positive for asbestos.
So after the windows were replaced and before the bathroom was renovated, I did the testing and I found the results were indeed positive. And that was alarming because 3 windows had been replaced without any precautions.
Asbestos is a carcinogenic material, and if it becomes airborne and is inhaled, it can cause fatal illnesses such as mesothelioma and asbestosis. Canada has banned the use of asbestos-containing materials, but they were widely used in construction materials until about 1990. This year, British Columbia became Canada's first province to have a law that requires licensing of employers doing asbestos abatement work and certification of workers who do the job, including sampling and testing. Laura Chase says Manitoba should do the same.
Clearly, the current situation is unsafe. It was unsafe in my case, and the fact that there's so little accountability because there is no license. A person can't lose a license that they don't have in the first place. So how can there be any kind of accountability in a system like this?
The province says that's being evaluated in a review of the Workplace Safety and Health Act, with recommendations expected in early 2025. CBC News contacted the property manager for Chase's house about the asbestos test results, but a spokesperson declined to discuss the case. When Chase decided to get her own asbestos testing done rather than rely on the property managers, she contacted Winnipeg firm J&D Environmental to get the samples for testing.
What you're showing us here is actually an incredibly common issue.
Danielle Kolba is founder and president of J&D Environmental, as well as Duracan Laboratory Group. He has about 20 years' experience in asbestos work and consulting.
You get false negatives quite often on sites, and this is where you want competent people or consulting firms that actually know how to collect the sample, know where those samples should be collected from, and get you the most authentic data possible to determine if there's asbestos in it.
Kolba says it's important to make sure the sample collection for asbestos testing is always done by an independent third-party company rather than by the contractor who will be doing the renovation work. Virilyn Kubinek, CBC News, Winnipeg.
October is Women's History Month. It's a time to honor and celebrate notable women and their achievements. Throughout this month, we're going to introduce you to women who are breaking barriers. They may be at the top of their career field or helping ensure this province is a little bit better off. These are people we think you should know about. This woman is a Métis athlete, a mom, a lawyer, an advocate, and she's someone giving back to the community. Jamie Menzies, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jamie, you've represented Manitoba a number of times at the North American Indigenous Games, the Canada Games, and you've been named Manitoba's Female Indigenous Coach of the Decade. So I want to start there with sport. And what does sport mean to you?
It's a big question. It's meant different things at different times of my life, but I think the consistent threads are that it's given me spaces to build relationships and feel part of a community. And although the goals have changed, it's always given me a space to work towards goals. And those have looked different over the years, but those have been two important things in my life.
Anybody who's been involved in sport knows how important it can be to them, myself included. And one thing you've really taken is a holistic approach when it comes to your coaching, and you've really been relentless in using sport as a catalyst for social change. So I want you to tell us a little bit about the club that you founded.
Well, Aguchin volleyball. Aguchin is a word that means hanging in the sky or a celestial body, which I thought was a nice, or which my friends and I thought was a nice idea for volleyball. It was kind of born out of frustration and also born out of wanting to use the skills that I have to contribute to something. Frustrations being just the lack of women, Indigenous women, Two-Spirit folks, and just Indigenous people generally in elite sport or post-secondary sport or coaching, and trying to kind of create a pathway for that to happen a little bit more in whatever way I can. I didn't do it alone. Aguchin was born out of community support and a lot of people, all hands on deck. And yeah, for 7 years, it's taken different shapes and taken on different projects, but I'm really enjoying working within it.
I love that it's a space where you've made for people to feel safe, be able to grow, be able to ask questions, especially for Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. And why do you think places like this club and like other programs like this are so important, especially for Indigenous women and girls?
Well, I think anyone who knows me knows that it's actually not about the volleyball or the sport at all, Aguchin. It is really just about safe spaces for groups of people that historically and currently don't always have safe spaces. It's about keeping like the retention of girls Two-Spirit folks in sport at an age where classically there's a high drop-off rate. And one of the more recent goals of mine is to mentor Indigenous coaches. So that's sort of where I'm putting a lot of my energy right now. I think that representation matters, and to have Indigenous women and Two-Spirit folks in positions of authority, or the classically, the positions taken up by white cis men. That's sort of one of Aguchin's projects as well.
When you and I spoke earlier, we talked about making sure that people at a young age had Indigenous superheroes to look up to. You're raising a child of your own. Just speak a little bit about why you think that's so important, that we see our Indigenous women, Two-Spirit folk, at the top of their game, so that they have, young people have somebody to look up to.
Yeah, well, not only relationally, but also systemically in this country, in a lot of countries, Indigenous women specifically have many powers working against them. In Aguchin sports spaces, we're building Indigenous women and Two-Spirit folks up. We're celebrating their skills. We're cheering and, getting people in touch with their bodies, their confidence, play, laughter, joy. I love that my 6-year-old son gets to grow up thinking of Indigenous women as superheroes and super athletes, and not some of the other ways that Indigenous women can be portrayed in media or historically have been framed.
Well, that's all that we have time for. I didn't even get to touch on your advocacy. You're also a lawyer. You give back to so many people, and you are one of our superheroes this month. Jamie, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for chatting.
October is Women's History Month. It's a time to honor and celebrate notable women and their achievements. And throughout this month, we're going to introduce you to women who are breaking barriers and helping ensure this province is a little better off. This woman is a passionate champion of Manitoba's creative and cultural sector. Carol Vivian joins me now. Hi, Carol.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Well, Carol, you spent 3 decades as the CEO and film commissioner for Manitoba Film and Music. Manitoba would quite literally not be what it is, this industry, without you. At the helm, you were trying to sell Manitoba to the world. What did it take to convince Hollywood bigwigs to come shoot in the prairies?
Oh, it's funny because I think about my first trips to Los Angeles, and we didn't even have GPS then. There was nothing. I was using maps, like actual paper maps to work out my routes. But you know what? I think they're very business oriented in Los Angeles, and I think as long as you came across credible and you knew what you were doing, you got a meeting. And so even though at first we certainly didn't have flights, we didn't have a full crew. They still took the meetings, which I really now, and thinking back, really respect that. And then I remember one of the producers I met with said to me, you know what, Carol, you need an incentive to bring us to Winnipeg, to Manitoba. You're just not on the map. And so that's what prompted getting that tax credit. And we were the first Manitoba, the first province in Western Canada to have a tax credit. And it really started that journey. It really helped a lot. So I'm very grateful for having that.
Yeah, you pioneered that film tax credit. As you said, it was the first in Western Canada. That was back in '97. It was really a game changer. So why was that so important to the industry and for you to really help facilitate that to get things going here?
Well, it was really important to the industry because I think you needed to add incentives. And there were incentives in other places, but not as good as the one we ended up with. And it showed them we were serious, we were in the game, and that we really wanted their business. And so for me, it was just a really critical piece of the infrastructure we needed to have here. Along with that first studio that was built, that was really groundbreaking. And, you know, we just continued on, and then we just had great training programs. And even within the tax credit, we had provisions that if we didn't have a crew person available, willing, or able here, they could bring that crew person in from anywhere in the world. But we need to have, if they maximize that, we needed to have 2 Manitobans trained. And so that allowed us to keep building our crew base to where it is today. And like now, it's like crazy how many shoots are going on. I just love it.
It's amazing, and I don't think any Winnipegger can say they haven't seen a film set as they've walked around downtown or in many parts of the city. I love seeing the Christmas movies shooting. So is there a movie or a show that was really like a feather in your cap that you saw when it came here, maybe an actor or actress?
Well, I think there was 2 films that really were breakout for us. One of them was Capote. That was an amazing film. It was won an Academy Award. And then Shall We Dance? Shall We Dance was the largest feature film we ever had here, and it just opened those doors. So I would have to say, for offshore production, those 2 really kind of set the bar for us.
You are also a Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal recipient. You've been honored with both the Order of Manitoba and last week the Order of Canada. What do these accolades mean to you?
Oh, it's kind of like pinch me. It's really amazing. It's quite incredible, rewarded for something that you love doing. And I never expected them. You don't know that you're nominated. So when you get those calls to tell you that you are now a recipient, it really quite literally knocks you off your socks. So I'm very grateful for being honored this way. I never expected it, and I'm really flattered and honored.
Well, Carol, you are one of our women's superstars this month. And I have you here in just a few words and seconds. What would you tell somebody that wants to go into this same field, or your younger self looking back on this?
Oh, to my younger self, I would just say, do what you did. Don't be afraid. Take those risks. When something's presented to you, that's a career move or an opportunity, don't be afraid to do it. Just take those risks, take those chances. It'll always pay off. As long as you're passionate and committed to what you're doing, people will respond to you. And it has to come from your heart, and it has to be sincere, and people know that. So as long as you're doing that, just keep doing what you're doing. It'll happen.
Wise words. Carol, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
$150 Winnipeggers are being awarded for their contributions in their community, all part of commemorating the city's 150th anniversary. Felicia Adams spoke to one of the awardees.
So this is the second oldest bridge in all of Winnipeg.
Jim Smith did not imagine being awarded by the city for sharing his passion for history.
Totally surprised. I just couldn't believe it.
Smith is the creator of the Northeast Winnipeg Historical Society. The group looks to record and preserve the history of the area, like the Louise Bridge. Would this be sort of the original bridge?
That's the way it would have looked. I guess they have the sailboat, back from this is a drawing from like the, 1890s, early 1900s. That's the way it would have looked, yes.
And so this would be all wood at the bottom there?
the base of it where the tracks were, that was all wooden base rather than concrete. Like now it's concrete and that, but no, it was all wood.
The awards celebrate the city's 150th anniversary. The 150 recipients were nominated by people who think they've made an impact. Along with a medal, a tree will also be planted in their name. Among the recipients are Elder Barbara Nipinak, Scott Oak, and Desiree Scott. The mayor, Scott Gillingham, says those who are receiving an award are leaders in their community.
These are people who are, a lot of times are not paid for the work that they do. These are people who give back to the community in a variety of ways.
The Northeast Winnipeg Historical Society was created 16 years ago and since then has gained thousands in followers. Its creation stemming from a lack of information specific to the area.
I decided I would do my own research. If I wanted to know more, then going to City of Winnipeg archives, old newspapers, and just finding out the stuff myself, which I've published, which I've printed online.
Smith's work attempts to preserve stories that would otherwise be forgotten, like the old East Kildonan City Hall, constructed in 1951, which became a senior center, and this home on Winterton Avenue, built in 1902, where the mayor and the council of East Kildonan once sat.
I look upon, if I'm going to be remembered after I'm gone, or people know of me, it's because of my history work.
Getting recognized for that work adds another chapter to the story. Felicia Adam, CBC News, Winnipeg.
This is it. This is the line that separates Canada from the United States. For years, illegal crossings have been a big problem here. The U.S. Border Patrol and RCMP taking a rare step in talking about surveillance and the equipment they're using, showing off equipment like this scope truck that can see up to 16 kilometers, along with boats, drones, snowmobiles, an attempt to deter people who want to cross illegally.
Our goal as for the integrated border enforcement side in the RCMP is to make sure we want to know who's coming into Canada, what threat they may pose.
In 2022, the Patel family, a young family of 4 from India, froze to death trying to cross from Manitoba into Minnesota. In 2016, 2 other men lost their fingers and nearly froze to death trying to cross from the U.S. into Canada. Now, crossings here spiked in 2018 when then President Trump spoke widely about deporting illegal immigrants. Rhetoric that has returned to U.S. politics with an election booming, both candidates talking about cracking down on illegal immigration.
We have a job to do, and we're going to enforce the law at the border. We're going to enforce border security.
Now, it's not clear whether politics will drive another surge of migrants here, but there are smuggling rings active on both sides of the border with people crossing both ways. The message here, there are eyes on this line. Still, crossing it illegally can be deadly. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News on the Canada-US border at Emerson, Manitoba.
Andrew Marquis is best known as the developer of the Parker lands in Winnipeg. Between 2020 and 2023, he worked as a consultant and advisor for Peguis First Nation, working on a debt repayment plan, consulting on housing shortages related to flooding, and using treaty land entitlement funds to purchase real estate assets. In a statement of claim filed on September 27th, Peguis alleges Marquis, companies he controls, and a company owned by his wife failed to act in the best interests of the band and benefited financially from breaches of duty. In the claim, Peguis alleges Marquis has consistently misused his power and discretion as a fiduciary to enrich himself to the detriment of Peguis. According to the claim, Marquis had the Peguis First Nation Real Estate Trust purchase this former golf course in East St. Paul because he was interested in developing it into housing, according to the claim. Peguis claims Marquis directed the real estate trust to agree to a $5.5 million loan from a company owned by Marquis's wife. That loan now has an interest rate of 9.2%, according to the claim. Peguis also claims Marquis directed the real estate trust to buy and sell this vacant land along Wellington Crescent in Winnipeg. According to the claim, the province sold this land to Peguis on the basis it would be added to its reserve lands. Peguis claims a subsequent sale to a private developer breached the terms of the purchase and the treaty land entitlement agreement. In the claim, Peguis alleges Marquis had the ability to unilaterally exercise his power and discretion in a manner that affected Peguis's legal, economic, and practical interests. Peguis was vulnerable to and at the mercy of Marquis's exercises of discretion and power. In a statement, Marquis called the claim baseless, without merit, and legally flawed. The notion that I, or anyone else for that matter, had total control of all of Peguis's financial, legal, and other matters is pure fiction. Marquis called the claim an attempt by Peguis to distract from its inability to resolve a $172 million lawsuit from a receiver for a former lender and a federal court challenge of its 2023 election launched by former Chief Glenn Hudson against current Chief Stan Bird. None of the allegations made by Peguis have been proven in court. No statement of defense has been filed. Marquis says he will immediately move towards striking the claims. Bart Lekivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And I want to start with the Skibitsky sentence.
Yeah.
With so much at stake in delivering that sentence, what was going through your mind?
Well, first of all, I can't get into too much detail about the trial itself, but I'm happy to talk about the surrounding circumstances. I'll talk about Skibitsky insofar as it was what I think characterized before as a bit of a metaphor for all of the